Thank you, everybody, and welcome. You're all very welcome to today's full council meeting. Please note that the Mayor has tendered his apologies for this meeting as he is attending COP27 conference. Councillor Craig Cheney will be deputising on this occasion. Welcome. Welcome to members of the public who are attending in the public gallery, and to those, if there are any, in the conference hall who are watching this, and those also watching it via YouTube at home. For those in the building, I'd like to draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedure. Please leave the chamber by the nearest exit to you and then congregate at the cathedral. As with any council meeting, please treat each other with due courtesy, tolerance and respect. Thank you. Item 2, do we have any apologies for absence? At the moment, we have received apologies from Councillors Bradshaw, Goodman, Holland, Townsend, and, as I've said, from Mayor Rees. Are there any others? Councillor Townsend. Can we? Sorry. It didn't make it to the piece of paper. Thank you. So no other apologies. Okay. Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Can I ask if any councillors have any interest to declare regarding today's agenda? No? Thank you. Agenda item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the previous meeting of full council, held on the 18th of October 2022, be agreed as a correct record. Oh, sorry, Councillor.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, I wish to request an amendment to those minutes, if I may. 2 amendments, in fact, in respect of item 13, which was the golden motion. I first of all wish to be put on record the comments that were attributed to me in Private Eye, when I can't think of a more reputable magazine to quote from, and I would like to see them incorporated in those minutes. Councillor Jeff Gollop said it doesn't matter to me if that was systematic or random surveillance. It was wrong. Only an independent inquiry will tell us who was responsible for this. I would like that incorporated as a key part of that debate. I'd also, my Lord Mayor, like an additional inclusion in those minutes. I condemn bullying and intimidation anywhere, and particularly when it's directed at me. And I believe the comments that the Mayor made at that meeting were out of order, but we shouldn't sweep them under the carpet and ignore them. They should be minuted. And I request that the minute be amended to incorporate the wording, which has already been submitted in a formal complaint from my group leader, so that that can be incorporated in that minute as well, for the whole world to see the eloquence and the sympathy and the understanding that the Mayor shows in dealing with such a matter. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gollop. I think the best thing to do in this instance is to take this item away and have the minutes discuss this point, review the minutes and bring the minutes back to the next meeting. Do you agree with me, Monitoring Officer? Okay. So we're not going to ratify these minutes now. Okay, so we're now on to Lord Mayor's business, which is agenda item 5. Bristol's annual Remembrance Sunday parade and service will be taking place at the Cenotaph on this Sunday, the 13th of November. The parade will be led by 7 Military Intelligence Battalion, based at the Army Reserve Centre in Horfield. Military units, cadet contingents, veterans and related groups will assemble on College Green, ready to march down to the Cenotaph. There will be followed by a walking civic procession. Significant city centre road closures will be in operation from 5 a.m. in the morning. I ask members of the Council now to join me in 1 minute's silence as a mark of our respect. Please be upstanding. Please be seated. As part of Lord Mayor's business, I would also like to make two further announcements of sad losses. So, first of all, I'd like to note the sad news that former Liberal Democrat councillor Anthony Wood, who served the Eastville ward from 1998 to 2001, has recently passed away. We are also saddened to hear about the recent passing of campaigner Julie Boston, who was a regular attendee of these meetings. Julie's family have asked me to read the following statement in her memory. Our mum, Julie Boston, loved living in Bristol for the past 3 decades. She came here towards the end of her teaching career, sought out old friends, made new friends, and found communities that welcomed her. As well as loving Bristol, she saw many of its problems: inequality, the running down of services, decisions made which favoured one community, the so-called business community. With imagination, vigour and fun, she linked up with others in an attempt to preserve and improve aspects of Bristol life. She helped to form poetry groups where people could express their lives, loves and loathes. She championed Bristol's boy poet Thomas Chatterton, and she helped to instigate the Friends of Suburban Bristol Railways to stop the decline of local train lines. She made such a difference that one of the train guards said she improved the quality of life for thousands of Bristolians. Julie fought for everything that was public, from public libraries to public lavatories via public transport and public footpaths. She knew these essential services needed to be maintained and improved. At a time when they were being diminished, fighting for them appeared radical and controversial to some. To Julie, it seemed sensible and achievable. She was inspired in recent years by the movement around long-standing socialist campaigner Jeremy Corbyn, and met and worked with many new and often young people hoping to secure a better future for the many, not the few. She often attended council meetings as she passionately believed that councillors should stand up and fight for the people who had elected them, rather than the government's business and developers who had done so much harm here and elsewhere in the world. Julie saw hope in people who managed to take a stance against the odds, with whom she made firm friends and inspired them to challenge bad decisions, stick to their beliefs, and not accept second best for ordinary people. Julie's ideals and inspiration will live on in the many who have contacted the family, in the local media in the last few days of her life, and in the weeks since. As a Spanish speaker, Julie would say, "La lucha continua." The struggle continues. And one other matter on Lord Mayor's business, I'd like to notify members that the CPR training is being offered by Great Western Air Ambulance on the 13th of December at City Hall, ahead of our next meeting here. So please contact Member Development Officer if you're interested in attending. Thank you. So we're on to item 6, which is public forum. 30 minutes will be allowed for this item, which is split into 15 minutes for petitions and statements and 15 minutes for questions. Details of the petition, statements and questions received have been published on our website. I'll go through the list, calling on those who have indicated they planned to attend the meeting. Speakers are asked to pay attention to the traffic lights on the dais and to start to wrap up when the lights turn to amber. At today's meeting, there were no public forum petitions received for this meeting. There were a total of 24 public statements received. A list will be displayed on the screen. 8 members of the public have indicated that they plan to attend to speak to their statements. And they're displayed on the screen, and we'll run through those statements in the order that's there. So I will invite each person to speak for 1 minute. Please summarise your statement and bear in mind that they were published and they have been read by the Deputy Mayor and the councillors in advance of the meeting. So you don't need to read the statement out again, speak to it. So, first of all, the first person on the list is, do we have Hayden Gill? The roving microphone is coming to you.
That working, I don't think. Okay, I'm just going to read out my statement. Dear Deputy Mayor, Bristol faces multiple challenges: the cost of living, public health, and of course climate change. There may not be a silver bullet, but there is a silver bike bell. Of the most deprived households in Bristol, nearly half don't have access to a car. Key services need to be accessible to everyone without relying on a car or be at the mercy of First Bus. A comprehensive cycling network will help with the cost of living. Physical inactivity contributes to 1 in 6 deaths in Bristol. Air pollution causes another 300. A comprehensive cycling network will improve public health. Businesses depend on cycling: takeaway delivery, e-scooters, parcel delivery, and even plumbers. People who can safely walk and cycle to their local high street spend more money there. A comprehensive cycling network will support local businesses. Bristol was once a cycling city. Other UK cities are catching up and pedalling past us. Brighton, Cardiff, Oxford, Leeds, Leicester, Cambridge, Nottingham, Coventry, Liverpool, Birmingham, Manchester, Newcastle, Glasgow, to name but a few. The Mayor's city address summed it up well. I've changed the first 2 words. Cycle networks are fast, efficient, low-carbon transport systems. They are essential for a modern
Hayden, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up,
Bristolians
please.
have waited long enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have Deborah Hurst speaking a statement on the Golden Motion? Nope. Don't see Deborah. Sarah Harris. Sorry. Cecilia Farron.
Hello, I'm going to read to keep it to the minute. I love the freedom and exercise that cycling gives me, but most people think I'm crazy to be cycling at the age of 73, and it shouldn't be like this. Even Thangham Debonair told me the other day that she won't cycle in Bristol as it's too risky, but she does cycle in London. So what's the problem? There's lack of protected cycle lanes. There's no enforcement of the 20 miles per hour. There's illegal parking everywhere. My typical cycle from the Arches into town involves encountering parents illegally parked outside the high school. Cheltenham Road, you've actually removed the bike lane, so now there's yet more cars parking on the double yellows up to Ashley Road, making it risky for cyclists, and it can delay ambulances. Finally, Stokescroft, in and out of town, always has vehicles parked on the double yellows. It's people that own our roads, not cars. Cyclists deserve respect and equality and not be made to feel like second-class road users by Bristol City Council.
Thank you, Cecilia. Now I'd like to ask Liv Fortune, who's got a statement on Julie Boston.
I don't really want to repeat what I wrote in the statement that you've all read or the letter that was published in the Bristol Post, but Julie really was an amazing and inspirational woman. Words like that get bandied around far too often nowadays, but she really was awesome. You know, people like Julia, 1 in a million. Bristol's lost one of the most enthusiastic and dedicated campaigners I've personally ever come across. You know, there were very few causes on the progressive wing of politics that Julie wasn't involved with, or at least aware of. I've lost a very dear and trusting and loving friend. Julie had a huge heart, and she really did put her heart and soul into trying to make Bristol and the world a better place. She never gave up hope, and I admire her for that, because I find it quite easy to just, throw the towel in if things are too difficult, but she would persevere. She really would. And all I can say is that when I grow up, I want to be like Julie Boston. Now, she'd hate all of this. Although our hearts are in the right place by doing this, she'd say it's not relevant to the cause, whatever the cause would, might be. So I owe Julie this much at least. With Jeremy Unt's renaissance of damaging austerity coming to a council near you, I implore Bristol City Council to really seriously think twice about balancing the books before preserving public services.
Thank you, Liv. I'm going to have to stop you there. Thank you. Can we move on to Alison Wren? Speak to your statement, thank you.
I have a first-class biology degree and a master's in health education and have taught biology and other sciences for many years. I refer to the Silver Motion of 5th of July, which states, "The Council resolves to recognise and affirm trans men are men, trans women are women. The national curriculum in science at key stages 3 and 4 requires the teaching of structure and function of male and female reproductive systems, gametes and fertilisation, also sex determination in humans, which results from the fusion of either an X or Y-bearing sperm with an X-bearing ovum. At A-level, various differences in sexual development, formerly known as intersex, are also discussed. Is it the Council's position that these objective biological truths are in fact anti-trans propaganda, as described in the motion? As someone whose retirement was hastened by being required to agree that girls can be boys, I am concerned as to the effect of this motion on both teachers and their students, and would ask the Council to clarify its position in relation to the teaching of biology in Bristol schools."
Thank you. Can I now move to Christine Fraser?
Hello. I refer to the Silver Motion of 5th of July 2022. It was resolved to recognise and affirm trans men are men, trans women are women, non-binary and genderqueer people's genders are valid. For the sake of clarity, it would be helpful if the monitoring officer or the Lord Mayor could confirm, to quote the monitoring officer of South Oxfordshire Council in respect of a similar motion, that the motion was political in nature and was non-binding in nature or legal effect. In particular, it would be helpful if there could be similar confirmation regarding the resolution to not award contracts to organisations that promote an anti-trans agenda or propaganda, given that Article 5 of Bristol City Council Constitution states the Mayor makes executive decisions within a policy framework. Council does not have the legal power to take executive decisions. It would be useful to officers and potential contractors if it could be clarified as to whether or not the resolution is irrelevant. Thank you.
Can we move to Christina Cooney, please? Christina?
Hi, I'm going to try and summarise my statement. So I started cycling in Bristol during COVID, so the local train stopped running and my car, when I moved back to Bristol, the engine broke, so I decided to try and see if I could live without a car. I found I absolutely loved it. It was so good for my physical and mental health. I didn't have to rely on public transport. You know, when you leave on your bike, you know exactly what time you're going to get there, and unfortunately, you can't rely on first bus to turn up. During COVID, it was great because the roads were really empty and quiet, but since motor vehicles have built up more and more since 2022, it's been difficult to stay as positive. People using bikes to get around the city are so much more vulnerable than people sitting in cars, but a lot of drivers don't see it this way. Cars close past daily and do not adhere to the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit, which makes me feel very vulnerable. I've been beeped and shouted at often, which is incredibly unpleasant. So 10 years ago, I wouldn't believe that I'm saying this, that London is far safer to cycle in than Bristol. My sisters, when they visit me here, feel unsafe, but they feel safe in London. So I carry on because I'm a confident cyclist. However, how many children do we see cycling to school? How many minority groups? Putting this segregated infrastructure in place is key. I look forward to you taking action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a statement from Colin Smith.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's good to be back. Just wanted to make a couple of points. If you didn't already know, that wonderful building across College Green is the Lord Mayor's Chapel. If you haven't been, please come. At the moment, there are discussions going on between Bristol City Council and the Cathedral about taking over the management of the building. And as a trust, the Friends of the Lord Mayor's Chapel Trust, we are passionate about the future of the chapel. And we're passionate that more people, visitors to Bristol and Bristolians themselves, come to visit us and see what a wonderful place it is. It's not only wonderful in terms of its building, but in terms of the music and the preaching and the religion and all the faith that is delivered there. And I give my compliments to Harold Clark, the Lord Mayor's chaplain, who sat next to me at the moment. But we are worried that
to wind up now. Sorry.
We are worried that,
in
fact, we have been omitted from the consultation about future arrangements for the chapel and for the retention of the non-denominational status.
Thank you, Colin. It's 1 minute to speak to your statements. Thank you. Do we have Tom Merchant? Tom.
Hi, my name's Tom Merchant. I'm trying to speak up for the housing officers on strike over workplace stress. Bristol City Council is trying to squeeze a quart into a pint glass with a never-ending stream of work. It's increasing over and over again. They can't take any more. Please, can somebody with some sense sort of bring this to a good negotiated end, please? Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we're going to now move on to public questions. The questions received will be published on the have been published on the website and will now be shared on the screen. Okay, yeah. So 24 questions were received from 24 members of the public, and 8 of those have indicated that they wish to attend today. We'll try to cover as many questions as possible in the 15 minutes available. It may not be possible for everyone to speak, so we ask for your patience as we run through the questions in the order. When I call on you, please read your question out, and then we will try to show the question on the screen. The Deputy Mayor will reply verbally. Following the response from the Deputy Mayor, you'll be invited to ask one supplementary question. Okay? So we start with Johnny Adcock. Do we have Johnny Adcock? Once the microphone gets to you, if you can please ask your question.
Hello, thank you. So my question concerns a section of Whitehall Road that is very narrow and dangerous for pedestrians and is polluted. So my first question is, can the council provide a plan to improve this section of Whitehall Road for pedestrians? And my second question is, can the council provide a plan on how air pollution is going to be reduced on this section of Whitehall Road?
Thank you. So do you want to answer both questions together?
Yeah, thanks for your question, Johnny. So in terms of the first one, I mean, we have been progressing a crossing scheme in Easton, and Councillor Don Alexander recently met with the local councillors, Barry and Jenny Bartle. The scheme is a local area committee request for £80,000 for measures to improve road safety and pedestrian facilities in Whitehall Road, mainly between Easton Road and Russelltown Avenue. The request is for a widened footway, which can't be done without reducing the road to one way and would have knock-on impact on the traffic flow around the whole area. So the bid hasn't moved forward at the moment because we haven't the resources in place to action it. We've got a recruitment freeze on. It's the answer to lots of questions tonight, to be honest. We're currently carrying 400 less staff than we need as an organisation, making things very, very difficult. So that's the answer to your first question. On the second one, so the CAS itself works to improve the overall performance of Bristol's vehicle fleet by incentivising and supporting vehicle owners to upgrade to less polluting models or consider alternatives, and that will improve air quality across the whole city. Everywhere in the city should be legally compliant, should be at legally compliant levels of NOx by the end of 2023, including Whitehall Road.
Johnny, do you have a supplementary question?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting or the bad aspects of this road is that you get very large lorries travelling down there, which to me, when you walk down that road, is quite unbelievable, really, that lorries would be allowed down there. I just wonder whether that would be an option to consider, whether we could restrict access to that part of the road for large vehicles.
I mean, I'm not an expert on transport policy. I'll probably refer you to Councillor Don Alexander. Don, if you're happy to take that one.
Yeah, I mean, in order to do that, we'd have to consult. We would have to follow a legal process, and part of that would be deciding where those trucks would go instead of down that road. So it does lead to some complexities, but that's why we're piloting the livable neighbourhood in East Bristol, because we believe that that offers a holistic solution to many of these problems, and it's going really well.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Johnny. Do we have Neil Roper? Neil. So your question on social care, if you can read out the question.
Good evening, thank you. So for the first question, I would ask you to basically accept, based on the data that you've seen and the situations I've put to you in my preamble text, that there is a clear shortfall in social care services in this city. So how do you reconcile this clear shortfall in the services that are provided against various press reports, including in Private Eye, which we've heard mentioned before, including the £3,000 a month that was spent having the Twitter account of the Lord Mayor and the City Council being monitored?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, simply put, the government don't put enough money into public services. They don't put enough money in social housing. There's not enough money in physical and mental health care or prevention. We have taken huge strides in tackling homelessness, but we do need the government to keep up the momentum of the Everyone In scheme, which helped us to reduce rough sleeping numbers by 80%. However, the long-standing structural challenges remain the same. We need more homes. But if we can maintain the momentum, we can go a long way to achieving sustainable success, and it is therefore vital that the government learn from the success of the COVID-19 response. They need to step up the level of investment in homelessness services and accommodation for us to avoid a future surge in rough sleeping. On your point around social media and I guess really what you're really saying is alternative spend. So how can we justify anything when put against something emotional? So I don't know, how do we justify investment in the culture sector? We do, because local government exists to do more than just deliver frontline services. It exists to do much more than that. That's getting increasingly difficult as time goes on. As for the point on social media monitoring, I mean, we do that, or we did that, because it's important for us to understand the public views on what we are doing as an organisation. It wasn't monitoring the Mayor's account, it was actually monitoring what people were saying in Bristol about things that were happening to them in Bristol. And I think that level of information is important to us. That said, we stopped it last year because we can't afford to do that anymore. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. May I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
The second question is a bit more simple. We've heard from other citizens here that, again, it is a clear shortfall across many services, and you've talked yourself about that. Could I ask a slightly simpler question, which is, what would our council tax or other means of taxation need to rise to fund that? And why is that conversation not being taught to us, that our council tax should go to £3,000 a month or £4,000 a month? Let us see the numbers that would be needed to make this right.
Yeah, okay. I mean, so legally we can't increase council tax beyond 1.99%. The government occasionally allow precepts, so in previous years, they've allowed a 3% precept that was ring fence for social care on top of the 1.99%, and occasionally they also allow us to add another percent to that 1.99%. We don't get to make that decision. That's something that is handed to us, and we consult on that, on those options, and we'll be consulting this week on a range of council tax rises. Council tax system is massively out of date and unprogressive. The council tax ban, so the rate at which you pay council tax is based on house values in 1991. If you look around this city, people that live in some of the most expensive parts, what are now the most expensive parts of Bristol, were not the most expensive parts of Bristol when I grew up here. So taking places like Easton or St Paul's, for example. So the system is massively out of date. In terms of what would it cost, what would we need potentially up to £87 million to balance the books this year. That is absolutely massive on a budget of 400 million. That's effectively a quarter of the council would have to stop doing what it currently does to be able to deliver that. That is very difficult, and we're waiting on the November the 17th decisions of the national government to allow us to plan for the future and to come out with those numbers again. We've published what we perceive to be the shortfall today, but that may change in 2 weeks' time.
You can ask one follow-up question.
Certainly. Could I ask that it is put to us in terms of a shortfall in those council tax bands, that perhaps put to us what those council tax bands would need to be to eliminate that shortfall, and perhaps put that to central government in those ways to ask them what's needed rather than what's needed to make up that shortfall? Would that be acceptable?
Yeah, I mean, we've made representation before to government actually about the council tax banding system, because it's very narrow and there are huge differences, and it could be much more progressively applied if we introduced a range of new bands. Obviously, that was knocked back, but we'll continue to make those representations as we go.
Thank you. Do we have David Angel? Thank you. We've got questions on cycling. Do you want to read your question out?
So Anne Hidalgo has shown us that a congested city dominated by motor traffic can move quickly and cheaply to active travel. This has improved residents' health and happiness, has reduced air pollution and CO2 emissions. Will the Mayor commit to publishing the delivery plan, the cycling delivery plan, before the end of his term in office, so that Bristol residents can enjoy the same benefits as Parisians? If not, why not?
I mean, to be able to do something similar to Paris and many other modern cities, we need an equivalent public transport network, which is why we have the ambition for a mass transit system. It will transform transport in Bristol, and a low carbon mass. So what is the alternative?
Given that the majority of journeys are under 5 miles, how will a mass transit system address those shorter journeys?
So how does a mass transit system address short journeys in London or Paris?
Okay, can we try and stick to some sort of question and answer system here, please? Thank you. So you've asked your question and you've asked your supplementary. So we have Cecilia Farron again. Yes.
I'm going to ask the second bit first, and it's a bit like David's question, that what plans do you have for making cycling safer for everyone, including grannies like me, because I really am the only granny I know who rides a bike around Bristol. I want it to be safer for children and old people, and I want to know what you're going to do to make it safer for people like me.
Yeah, thanks, Cecilia. I'm also a cyclist in the city, as is my wife and my children, and so I do absolutely appreciate the concerns. I commute to the office every day on a bike through the centre of Bristol. I appreciate how difficult it can be. In terms of the long-term plans, we have a local cycling, walking and infrastructure plan, and that's the blueprint we have for improving cycling infrastructure in the city. Delivering it all overnight is not easy. We're delivering it at the speed that we can currently afford.
And the secondary question is about enforcing speed limits. There's absolutely no enforcement of speed limits, nor of the parking, other than Clifton. Oh my God, you park in Clifton and you're done immediately. Park anywhere else where it's blocking roads and you're okay, Buster. You can carry on forever. I mean, down the A38, it's absolutely right the way where all that cycle path was removed. Should we let
the Deputy Mayor answer the question? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of enforcing the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, obviously that's the police. They do often ask if people will be willing to set up a community speed watch program. They'll help support that. So I recommend if you are able to do that, to set up a community speed watch program along there.
Okay, thank you. So can we move on to Philip Bird, who's got a question about Nelson Street? About enforcement?
Yeah, I mean, I guess ultimately we don't have enough enforcement officers to be trawling across the whole city every day, but we can target them. So if there is a particular spot that you're particularly interested in, we'll be happy to redirect them.
And I think I can say that as a councillor for Clifton, that the residents in Clifton think that it's not enforced in Clifton either. So it's not special there. So Philip Bird.
My Lord Mayor, and Acting Mayor, PQ16A, when will the shared footway and cycle route on Nelson Street be reopened?
I probably have to defer to Don on this one. This is not a subject I know a lot about. Don, can I ask you to answer that one?
Thanks, Craig. The answer is when the developer's done it properly. So this piece of cycle infrastructure is being delivered by a developer as part of their Section 106 agreement. They didn't do it properly at the beginning and they opened it up without permission, so we told them to close it and get it right. When they've got it right and we're satisfied that they've got it right, we will allow them to open it, and not until then.
Do you have a supplementary?
No, I'll do the supplementaries at the end if you don't mind, my Lord Mayor. Question B, the Cabinet member just answered the reason for the delay. Question C is a loading and unloading bay has mysteriously appeared on the footway in Nelson Street without a traffic regulation order. When are the developers going to be instructed to remove it?
Well, the Section 106 agreement with the developer will be clear, very prescriptive as to what he had to deliver. If he hasn't done it correctly, it will be checked, and it will not be opened until it is correct. We'll also check it post-opening to make sure that there is no disintegration of the quality of the work over a period of time.
Supplementary, if I may,
Yes.
my Lord Mayor. The loading and unloading bay is open on Nelson Street. It does not have a traffic regulation order.
Okay, if you could report that in an email to me.
It's been reported to planning enforcement. They've said they're not going to take any action. It's been repeatedly reported through Fix My Street, and as with most Fix My Street reports, they're closed without any action being taken.
That's not correct, because I use Fix My Street quite a lot myself, actually. Please send it to me in an email.
Yeah, I think the answer to this is for you to write to Don Alexander directly. He's offering to take it up for you, so I think that's your answer. Okay, thank you. We need to move on. Thank you very much. We do have one final person, which I think we've just got time to fit in. So that's Tom Bozanque. Is Tom here? I hope I'm pronouncing your surname correctly. Apologies if I haven't.
Testing. The first question was about painting around how invisible the space around the cycling infrastructure around the centre is and whether that might happen. I noticed that Councillor Dudd is here. He, off the record, a couple of years ago said we're not going to do that. Simple as that. Maybe things have changed. I'd like an answer to that. The second question, again, it's not just cyclists. I feel strongly about that, but also pedestrians. When we will get proper provision, it has been heartening tonight to see the number of people who've been standing up and saying this is not good enough, really. And so, I mean, you've pretty much answered it before, but. Again, adding my weight to this isn't good enough.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yeah, thanks, Tom. On the first point, I mean, I've already mentioned, but I cycle across the centre every day. I know how difficult it is and that it's not clear at all. Pedestrians wandering in and out, electric scooters shooting past you and weaving in about is not great. And had we been around at the time of the design, we may have looked at that differently. That said, the fountains are at the end of life, and we are going to look at a redesign. So an attempt to improve that area for pedestrians is in the future planning. So a conversation is ongoing about it. So there is hope that will be resolved. In terms of your second question, I mean, all developments and transport planning follow the transport hierarchy. So pedestrians, cyclists, horse riders, motorcyclists, cars, taxis, vans, minibuses, and finally large passenger vehicles and heavy goods vehicles. So we've got decades of transport planning to effectively undo as a city, because car was always king here across the country. And that's, we're doing what we can to get there, but it's a slow journey.
We are actually sort of over time on this, but I won't. You have to be very brief, please. I'm being generous here, giving you a question, and you're just making a big statement, so I'm going to stop you. Thank you. Okay, so that does actually conclude the questions received from members of the public. And thank you all for being here today. It's lovely to see a lot of people in the public gallery, and I hope maybe you'll stay for the rest of the meeting. We're now on to agenda item 7, which is petitions notified by councillors, and there were actually no petitions by councillors for this meeting. Agenda item 8 is a petition debate, which is make Bristol a place where everyone feels safe to cycle. So we can start that debate now, because the petition reached the 3,500 signature threshold to qualify for a full council debate. We will allow 20 minutes is the maximum time for this debate. The petition organiser is permitted up to 5 minutes to present the petition and its objectives. We will then proceed to the councillor debate. There will also be an opportunity for Deputy Mayor or the relevant Cabinet member to respond at the end of the debate. As a reminder, this is not an interactive discussion involving the public. The issues raised in the petition and the comments of members during the debate will be referred to the Mayor and relevant Cabinet member for a response. The petition organiser is Bristol Cycling. So, may I please ask Ian Pond and Toby Wells to present the petition. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Acting Mayor. This petition was established in response to the lack of delivery of a new Bristol cycling strategy, the last one being in 2016. We believe this petition will be one of the easiest for the Council to respond to and enact, because what we're asking for, a Bristol cycling strategy and delivery plan, is already a commitment within the adopted 2019 Transport Plan. The absence of a cycling strategy over recent years has meant there has been piecemeal initiatives, but no concerted plan to deliver the One City Transport goals related to cycling. Accordingly, Bristol has seen no sustained progress in the proportion of people who regularly cycle. Through the tough times of the COVID lockdowns, more Bristolians did choose to cycle, taking advantage of the quiet roads. However, as traffic volumes increased again and the emergency bike lanes were removed, this has slipped away. Other cities across the UK and globally have responded proactively to the change in attitudes and behaviours of their citizens towards the domination of the car on their streets. These cities, most of which have also declared a climate emergency, have committed themselves to making cycling safer and easier. We've understood that it's accepted by you, our elected council, that in order to make Bristol a healthier, cleaner, less congested and more sustainable place, we all need to reduce our reliance on the car, especially for shorter journeys. Therefore, alongside better public transport and more walking, enabling more journeys to be made by bike is part of the solution to achieve this. The engagement that we've seen with this petition mirrors the conclusions of the Council's own Quality of Life survey and its Citizens' Assembly, with many Bristolians calling for action to be taken to enable sustainable transport. Cycling is widely accessible, even to some of those with mobility impairment. It has a low entry cost, very low running costs, a key consideration in these times of a cost of living crisis, but it's not adopted by many, primarily because of the safety concerns. We and our supporters are petitioning you to make it safer and easier.
Thank you, Ian. The plan we're calling for is not only for the many people who already commute to work, go shopping or visit their friends and family on their bikes. Whilst helping those people is important, the real opportunity here is to help the myriad people who believe, often with good reason, it's not safe for me to cycle on the road. This strategy, therefore, should enable them to consider cycling as a practical and safe option for many of their journeys. The strategy and delivery plan we're asking for needs to address every component of their journey from start to finish. Firstly, it needs to enable access to bikes through transport switching grants and via a viable bike sharing scheme. It needs to make bike ownership practical for households who don't have secure storage space by deploying on-street cycle hangars. It should empower people to be confident on the roads through free access to cycle training. It should deliver a comprehensive city-wide network of joined-up cycleways that offer people the right level of protection for the conditions. Fifth, it should empower parents to feel safe for their children to cycle to school by rolling out school streets across the city. Sixth,
We should implement consistent wayfinding around the city to assist walkers and cyclists, but also to show other people how easy it can be. And finally, it should implement high-quality, secure cycle parking at major destinations so people can feel safe about the security of their bike. Cycling participation is not consistent across our city. It's important that this plan addresses the lower level of cycling within Bristol's most deprived communities. These neighbourhoods are disproportionately blighted by the most hostile roads, poor cycling infrastructure, and a lack of secure cycle storage, despite the residents being much less likely to own a car. Overcoming these inequalities will help give people affordable access to employment and skills across the city. Making cycling safer and easier in Bristol can be done quickly, cost-effectively, and with a high benefit-to-cost ratio. As has been proven in UK cities and around the world with cycling infrastructure, if you build it, they will come. Thank you for your time.
Thank you both. I would now like to call on Councillor Don Alexander to speak on behalf of the Labour Group. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I don't actually disagree with a lot that Ian or Toby have said. I guess one word that Toby said I do disagree with, which is the word quickly, because my experience of the last 18 months, a little bit less of being in this role, is that it is very difficult to get anything done quickly in highways. Just to give a bit of strategy background, the LC Whip, which is our guiding strategy, is a West of England document. So now we are handing over most of our strategy work to the region, quite rightly too. So the LC Whip is what guides us. And the LC Whip, it was created using a Department of Transport methodology. So it certainly emphasises the benefit to cost ratio of particular routes. That's because that's what they consider to be important. I would probably want to push back on that, but nevertheless, I want to get the money in. And it has been very effective. So for instance, it has brought in money for Princess Victoria Street, for Cotton Hill, Park Row, and for the livable neighbourhood in East Bristol. So it's been very effective. And so, and also we realise that the LC Whip isn't an exhaustive list. It's not an attempt to set out a vision for cycling for the whole city. It is really that brochure that we give to DFT and Active Travel England, who came down recently to visit and to film. We also recognise that there are radial routes that need investment as well. And that's part of the reason for the livable neighbourhood. And when you see the livable neighbourhood handbook come out, which will come out in the next few days, it will be a handbook that empowers local councillors and local residents to look at their local neighbourhoods and to look at the porosity of the and the accessibility of the neighbourhood, and to see how cycling works for them in their particular areas. I want to slightly push back on the suggestion that we sort of haven't got that much done, because I could tell you I spend a disproportionate amount of my time on cycling, and just some of the things that we've got done. For instance, I want to talk about, if we're talking about safety for cycling, probably the biggest thing we could ever do is provide people with clean air to breathe when they're exercising, going across the city. So in 1 month's time, we believe that our projections will suggest that leading up until the end of 2023, we will no longer have illegal levels of pollution anywhere in the city.
You are joking me.
No, I'm not.
I do not believe you. I don't believe you.
Well, that just coincides with the time when, unfortunately,
Okay. Well, the projections for the CAS suggest that at the end of 2023 we will not have any illegal levels of pollution in the city.
Councillor Alexander, your time is up, I'm afraid. So
that's the whole point of the CAS. And I could give you a whole long list of other things had I not been interrupted, including
Princess Victoria Street, the Portway, Bristol and Bath Railway.
Councillor Alexander, if you're getting onto lists, you're definitely going to be stopped.
Road, one of those very deprived areas.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Alexander, you have to sit down.
And those areas also
turn off his
need
microphone?
cycling provision,
Councillor
not
Alexander,
just the centre of the city.
you have to sit down. Thank you. I'd now like to call on Councillor David Wilcox to speak on behalf of the Green Group, who I'm sure will speak for 3 minutes and no more.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I rise to support the petition from the Bristol Cycling Campaign, which is so close to the aims and ideals of the Green Party. The petition notes that the current administration promised a cycling strategy in 2019, and somehow it's forgotten from the May 2021 Mayoral Manifesto. The administration proudly states that they have delivered 75 miles of segregated cycleways, but unfortunately I can find only a maximum of 12 miles of cycleway dedicated to cycling. The rest has conflict designed in from the start, as it is shared with pedestrians. Maybe they meant segregated from reality. However, we have recently seen the exact opposite, with cycle lanes being removed, as in Cheltenham Road. Other Labour-led councils like Birmingham, Manchester and Cardiff are streets ahead of us in delivering infrastructure for cyclists. These cities have shown strong, bold leadership prepared to make difficult decisions when needed. We believe Bristol deserves this too. According to Cycling UK, Bristol is not even in the top 20 places in England where cyclists cycle more than 3 times a week. And yet we know, and this petition proves, that the residents of our city want to cycle more. Providing safe, separate infrastructure is key to enabling more people to cycle. Whilst cycle training has a role to play, surveys consistently tell us that the best way to encourage cycling is to build separated, connected cycle paths, as evidenced by the increased cycling levels in London, Manchester and Paris. Returning to this administration's manifesto, they committed to delivering more on-street bike hangers, adding to the existing 15. How many car parking spaces have been repurposed into bike hangers since 2021? 0. London has 20,000 spaces in bike hangars, with thousands more in the pipeline. People need a safe, secure space to store their bicycles. This city has a problem delivering even the schemes it is budgeted for. The Active Travel Tranche 3 schemes for Upper Magdalen Street, Old Market and Cottam Hill were approved by Cabinet in September last year, yet only Cottam Hill has only been partially completed. The others are yet to break ground. This council needs to start taking the opportunity to work with Active Travel England seriously or face a needless loss of funding. Making Bristol safer for cyclists has many benefits for individuals and the city's health. It will go a long way in helping the city become carbon neutral by 2030, freeing up road space for buses and reducing the 140,000 motorised journeys every day and the amount of time Bristolians spend sitting in traffic. A delivery and strategy plan for cycling and aligning with a similar one for walking and public transport would allow the general public to have some faith that Bristol City Council was attempting to solve the acute crises of air pollution, congestion and cyclist safety that this city is facing. Finally, I want to paraphrase Professor Hannah Clark, who said on the Today programme yesterday about keeping the 1.5 centigrade pledge alive. We have the tools available to make the difference now. We are just not moving fast enough.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. I'd now like to call on Councillor Mark Weston to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. First of all, congratulations and thank you to the petitioners for bringing it today. It's no easy feat to gather 3,500 signatures. I'm sure you were sweating, particularly to get over that mark. I rise to support, I think, the broad aim of the petition. The slight caveat I will say on this one is the devil being in the detail. I do believe the city needs a cycling plan. And I think it needs to bring that forward for a whole multitude of reasons, and it needs to make sure that it isn't just always trying to get into the city centre, but actually moving around the radial routes as well. The slight caveat to that is, obviously, I want to see the devil in the detail to that plan before I give carte blanche support to it, but that, ideally, you would consult on a plan, so we can see that devil in the detail. I would, though, just pick up on something that you said earlier about it being quick. I don't think the whole plan can be quick, but I think elements of it can. And this is where the problem, when the mayor first got elected in 2016, we came in as part of, I agreed to chair, the Quick Win Congestion Task Group. Vari Threffel was the Cabinet Member for Transport at the time, and we came up with a series of things that could be done. Some of them were very quick. I just wanted to use one route. If you go on the A4018, it's a beloved topic today, and you go from the top of Black Boy Hill and you go straight across as if you're heading towards Cribbs Causeway, the cycle path is the pavement on your left as you're heading up. There is no means to get from the road to the cycle path. The only way you could do it is to turn the wrong way down a one-way street, mount the curb, which is, well, in cycling terms, about 4.5 foot high, but it's probably about that big, and then try and get on it. We've made it impossible to get to the cycling lane. So one of our quick wins was have a mount up, have a ramp that at least lets you get onto it. Instead, the cyclist either takes the life in their own hands and goes up the one-way street the wrong way, or stays on a very narrow road, which is very, very busy. The quick win solution is remarkably quick. The long-term part of the plan would be to actually have a path the inside of the trees along that. So the plan itself can have two components. It can have the quick win that's needed, which can be done quite cheaply, and then comparatively cheaply, and then it has the longer-term aspiration which requires more money. But what will make this more deliverable is if the council stops squandering money on transport schemes that are never going to happen. £15 million on an underground feasibility study is just a pipe dream, a literal pipe dream. Anytime I hear the word about underground, I still want to go to The Simpsons, monorail, monorail, monorail. It's never going to happen, but that money could make a massive difference. It was actually put into schemes that could make a positive improvement, such as a cycling path, such as bus improvements, such as pedestrian improvements. But it will never come to anything other than literally we may as well dig a hole in the ground and throw the money in. Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Weston. I'd now like to call on Councillor Andrew Varney to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor, and also congratulations to the petitioners today. The Mayor wants to deliver a mass transit system for Bristol, but in fact we've already got one. It's called the Bristol to Bath Railway Path, and every day thousands of journeys are made cheaply, efficiently and sustainably. It is without doubt our most successful piece of transport infrastructure in the entire city, removing thousands of car journeys and freeing up road space for those who need to use their cars. Good cycling infrastructure benefits everybody, not just cyclists. Back in 2008, Bristol was declared Britain's first cycling city, a great achievement. But 14 years later, anyone still making that claim would be met with incredulity. Many other cities have surged ahead, leaving Bristol trailing far behind. Under this administration, cycling has stagnated, with very few new schemes being delivered, and those that have come forward are often woefully substandard. The recent debacle on Nelson Street is a case in point, an unsafe, not fit for purpose bodge job that was forced to shut down a few days after opening. The infrastructure around the Cascade Steps is another low point, with aesthetics taking priority over practicality, so much so that the cycle path is virtually indistinguishable from the footpath, with the inevitable user conflict. In some cases, we've actually gone backwards, unbelievably removing cycle lanes on key arterial routes, including Cheltenham Road, and a proposal to remove them on White Ladies Road, although there appears to be some backpedalling on this idea in the face of enormous opposition. My Lord Mayor, I love cycling. It's good for your mental health. It's a great form of exercise. It's cheap, it's environmentally friendly, and you always arrive on time. Research tells us that many thousands of Bristolians would like to experience the benefits of cycling too, but they don't feel safe. Well, let's make it safe with a network of segregated cycle lanes for all ages and abilities. Let's remove the physical barriers on cycle paths that discriminate against those with non-standard bicycles. Let's roll out thousands of bike hangers in residential areas so that people have somewhere to store their bikes. And let's provide secure cycle parking at key locations so that people can be sure their bikes will still be there when they come to collect them. The Mayor has apparently got 15 million quid for his pet project, the Bristol Underground. You must be seriously deluded if you think that's ever going to happen. So let's not waste any more money on this ridiculous vanity project. Let's use that money to deliver real change for the people of Bristol. My Lord Mayor, the Bristol Liberal Democrats wholeheartedly support this petition. Let's get a cycling delivery plan and let's deliver it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Varney. I'd now like to finally call on Councillor Gary Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was glad to read in one of the statements and questions about the fact that 10, 15 years ago, Bristol was a leader in this area. And it's gone backwards, hasn't it? And it's gone backwards because of lack of planning and lack of coordination. We also had a walking strategy at that point. But if you speak to the Walking Alliance now, they'll say that the administration has lost interest. And I'm afraid that that applies to so many things. Sometimes money is spent, but it's not spent in a coordinated way. I'll give an example. We have an application, we don't know whether it's going to actually go through or not, for a very large development of redoing our town centre and flats in Knoll. It will have if it goes ahead, it will have a very large number of secure cycle spaces and very few cars. Fine. The trouble is that when the officers were tasked with doing something about the rather dangerous Wells Road for cyclists, they were told that they had to come up with an alternative route. That alternative route ignored this new development where most of the cyclists are actually going to be and decided to take it off somewhere else. There was a number of queries about this, and now we can't get any answers out of the department that's supposed to be designing this alternative route. Absolutely typical that, when there's an attempt to actually do something, the private sector's coming forward with the plans to support cycling, and I'm afraid the council officers can't actually work with us. We want, incidentally, to protect pedestrians as well. So from the Wells Road to the new secondary school should be a safe route for both cyclists and pedestrians. At the moment, there's a nice wide pavement for pedestrians, but we need to make certain that cyclists can go there in two segregated paths. They don't mix very easily. It's very cheap to do, very efficient, very effective, but are we hearing nods from the administration? I'm afraid not. So we need to think not just of cyclists, who are vital in part of our solutions for Bristol, but also the pedestrians. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. That is the end of this debate. I'd like to thank the petitioners for bringing it today, and would like also to say that we were asking Council to note the issues raised in the petition, together with the comments of the members that we've heard during the debate. The matter will now be referred to the Mayor and relevant Cabinet member for consideration and to issue a response to the petition organiser. Okay, thank you. So we're now moving on to item 10. I'd just like you to note that there's been a change to the running order. So we will be considering agenda item 10 before we go back to agenda item 9. So agenda item 10 is the Mayoral Commission update, where we will have a report from the Disability Equality Commissioner. This report is for noting. I'd like to ask the Commission Chairman, Alan Davies, to introduce the report. I think I would also like to make the general comment that members have agreed to speak for 2 minutes on this item. So it's 2 minutes for each member, please. So there's a lot of movement in the public gallery, so yes. Okay. So the Disability Equality Commission report, obviously. Okay, I think we've got a good a good atmosphere back in the room now, so I would like to ask you, Alan, to speak now.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And thank you, councillors. I am here to do my second annual report on the Bristol Disability Equality Commission. The report is in front of you. It reports, I think, on good, solid progress in the last 12 months of establishing the Commission. I want to highlight two things that are coming up very soon. We'll be launching a listening and talking event with disabled people across the city, which we were lucky to secure National Lottery funding for. And we have an event on the 29th of November that we're holding jointly with the Disabled Colleagues Network in the City Council, which all councillors are welcome to attend and hear about the engagement and also hear about the work of the Colleagues Network. But actually, I want to spend the time I have looking forward, not back. Many of you will know that I've been involved in disabled people's issues in this city for 30 years. And I've never been as frightened and as scared about the future for thousands of disabled people in the city as I am looking forward into next year. I genuinely believe that, as with COVID, we will see thousands of disabled people sadly lose their lives and end up as well in much, much worse conditions than they are now. Why do I say that? I think it's obvious to many that we are going into a long recession. The Bank of England says we are. And if we believe the Bank of England, then we are. That recession will last at least 2 years. And we all know that when companies seek to get rid of people, it's people like disabled people they get rid of first because they see them as a burden. We're looking at costs of fuel that are going through the roof, astronomically. Many, many disabled people will not turn their fuel on, and many disabled people will run up huge bills because of all the equipment they have to use and they have to charge up. We see a cost of living crisis that is massive, and we see a government telling us, and whichever colour government it would be, they'd be telling us the same. They're going to cut, they're going to cut, and they're going to cut. And when you cut the state, benefits for disabled people, welfare benefits always go first. And then finally, locally, whether it's the City Council, whether it's First Bus, whether it's shopping, whether it's other forms of transport, we see reductions in services. And in social care, we don't have a crisis. We have a catastrophe. We have a cataclysm. We have a social care system that is dead. I and many disabled people, frankly, don't care whose fault it is. We don't care if it's central government funding. We don't care if it's local government. What we care about is getting that system repaired. We care about a health system that doesn't have thousands of people on waiting lists. The Commission has a vision that this city is somewhere that all disabled people can say it's proud to live in. I believe, and we believe, that unless everybody in this city, yourselves, all partners and all stakeholders, pull together this year and make disabled people a priority, we will get nowhere near that aim. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd now like to call on Councillor Paul Goggin to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you. Well, I don't know how I quite follow that, really. Thank you to the Commission for the report and Alan for your passionate words, as always. The report states the Commission's main current concern is the cost of living crisis, which is set to have a profound effect on disabled people, as we've heard. Disability charity Scope found that extra costs faced by disabled people add up to an eye-watering £583 a month on average. And at the same time, council services are facing almost unprecedented extra cost pressures due to inflation being at its highest level for 40 years, alongside wage increases and soaring energy costs. All this on top of a £15 billion, I'll let that just hang there for a minute, £15 billion real-term reduction to core government funding since the Condemned Coalition of 2010. I'm glad to see that the commissioners have been appointed now. It's good to see Ruth Pickersgill and Lynn Parfitt amongst them, both very inspirational women. It's good to see that the commissioners and officers are engaging over the clean air zone, for example, trying to make sure that people with blue badge holders who've got more than one vehicle are not penalised. I'm glad to read the commissioner now. The commissioners now sit on a number of One City boards, and the chair has met with the council CEO and senior officers. Ensuring these voices are heard at the top and throughout the decision-making process will lead to better outcomes for all disabled people. Tough times are ahead, but I'm reassured by knowing that there will be people dedicated to making the case for disabled people in Bristol. So my thanks go to Alan and all the members of the Commission.
Thank you, Councillor Coggan. I'd now like to call on Councillor Lorraine Francis to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you. We have seen over a decade of cuts to health and social care, making it increasingly impossible for staff to deliver a fair and just service to all. With staff shortages across most sectors, with disabled people continuing to be among those most affected. I welcome the CQC commitment to ensuring that service users have access to the right support, right care, right culture, in regulating providers, supporting autistic people and people with learning disabilities. It is a commendable approach, but the question which springs out was what was the CQC doing previously and what will be different this time. Being included in day-to-day life, including having choices and control, keeping people safe, achieving equitable outcomes, this should be something that all service users expect. But being able to achieve this level of outcome requires a comprehensive, joined-up approach. If people with learning disabilities or mental health issues are to achieve independent living, this will require a significant financial and time investment. But continuing austerity means this will be an ongoing issue, as changes won't happen just because we want it to. Furthermore, as you say, public transport is under threat in the city, threatening the mobility of many, and we see the impact of the removal of key services across the city, including Dial-A-Ride. We need WECA to provide an adequate replacement service now. Finally, the Clean Air Zone should do more to support disabled people, visible and invisible. I will not say more on this for now, but trust that the Commission will continue to fight for the dignity of disabled people and will include their allies in that mission, because there are many of us willing to contribute. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I will finish by saying this: until there is an end to austerity, until the government recognises the need to fully fund frontline services, we will continue to be fighting a losing battle to deliver the level of services needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. And I'd now like to invite Councillor Steve Smith to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Alan, for bringing this report. This commission was set up to provide a voice here for the issues that disabled people face around the city. And Alan, you've given us a powerful and sobering example tonight of exactly why that's needed. I looked this morning at my Time Hop app, and it reminded me that just exactly a year ago today, I was actually retweeting the adverts for people to come and apply to join this new commission that was being set up. So it's brilliant, 12 months on, to see it up and running and being active and being vocal already. I wasn't going to name check anyone, but since Paul did, I will as well. I was really pleased to see Gordon Richardson appointed to the commission, because Gordon is a powerful voice in my community for a long time. I've learned from Gordon, not just about disability issues, but about the history and how my area works. And I know he will bring great experience and great ability and energy to what he does. And if this is a commission made of people of the calibre of Gordon, then it's an organisation that's going to go places and do great things. I do want to amplify one thing that's been said in the report, because it's something that residents in my ward have contacted me about in just the last couple of days. And it's the issue of the clean air zone and access and exemptions for blue badge holders. I know there is an exemption there at the moment. It doesn't work necessarily for everybody, and I hope we can get that fixed. But even if that does get fixed, the exemption only exists now till the end of March next year. We know what people are facing as we go into next year, and what that's doing is it's presenting people with a cliff edge. And it's people, in the most part, for whom active travel, for whom bus services, if they're there, aren't an option. I think that isn't fair, it isn't right, and I really hope that we can find a way of making that exemption permanent for those people. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I'd now like to call on Councillor Joss Clark to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Thank you very much for bringing us this report today. It's fair to say that it's a snapshot of the work undertaken at the beginning of a very long journey. And it's really a reality that the Commission is less than a year old, as obviously as Steve's just said. It's really impressive that you've been able to raise funds so quickly, and it's a real testament to your credibility and the importance of the Commission in the life of the city. And most importantly, it gives the ability for you to get things done. As we saw at last month's full council, you are really effective at raising important issues already. And the blue badge scheme is a good case in point. Thank you, Steve, for raising it. There needs to be some kind of compromise with the council so that people who need to drive into the city are able to, and not only in the motability vehicles, because I think that's where the problem is the blue badges are interchangeable within vehicles, and at the moment there's no compromise, and we don't seem to have a way forward for that. But I really do wish you good luck in the negotiations with the council and finding some positive compromise in getting blue badge holders the access to the city that they truly deserve. In doing the work of the Commission, I feel you have some real challenges in getting the views of a wide range of people with disabilities and such varying needs that people have, whether they're seen or unseen. This presents challenges as well as opportunities for you as a Commission, and I wish you well over the coming year and look forward to hearing from you the progress of the Commission in the coming year. But what I will say is we do know that that social services, adult social care budget is going to be under immense pressure, and it's going to offer you a real challenge in making sure that you deliver services for people with disabilities. Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. Thank you.
And finally, I'd like to call on... Didn't want to stop the round of applause. Finally, I'd like to call on Councillor Gary Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The first thing to say is that you judge a society by how it treats its most vulnerable residents. And we haven't got a great record in this country, have we? I think that I firstly like to echo the comments of congratulation on this report. The speech and the written report were tremendously clear, and that gives me confidence that in the time to come over the next year or two, the case that will be made effectively for disabled residents in Bristol, when there will be a shortage of money, whether we like it or not. I am also very concerned about proposals in cuts in social care budgets, and we don't know how bad those are going to be, but they're not going to be good. So I wish you every success in terms of fighting for the people that you care about and the sector of society that deserves our support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Thank you. So this report, as I said, is for noting, and that concludes this agenda item. Thank you very much, Alan. It was really a very powerful presentation, and thank you very much for that. We're now going to go back to agenda item 9, which is the Mayoral Commission update with the report from the Bristol Women's Commission. This is another report that is for noting. And once again, we have the person bringing the report has 5 minutes to speak, and members will have 2 minutes to speak on it. So I would like to ask the Commission Chair, Penny Gain, to introduce the report. You're welcome, Penny.
Thank you very much. As local representatives, you will know from your own work the reality of the issues affecting the lives of women and girls, which my report highlights. In work, both paid and unpaid, women's health, education, and in women's safety. Caring for both children and adults is often considered a drain on the economy, and so it hasn't been properly resourced. 830,000 women who provide care for an adult are unable to work, and 45% of women who care could and would take on more hours. And Bristol has one of the highest costs of childcare in the world. Society would reap rewards from investing in a caring economy. A national investment of 2% of GDP in the care economy would create 1.5 million jobs, double the number that would result from an equivalent investment in construction. But on top of this, wages and recognition of skills in the caring sectors are so poor that childcare and social care infrastructure are in serious decline. We're working with local, regional and national politicians to move this up the agenda, and recently hosted a caring economy event which brought people together to take this further. The caring economy needs to be adopted as part of the new industrial strategy. Our Women in Business Charter Group has continued to make significant progress on gender equality against all the odds, with the impact of COVID and now the economic downturn causing disruption to financial plans. The signatories to the Charter have made progress on parental leave, coaching for female leaders, women on boards and in senior positions, more flexible working and so on. I can't do justice to the scale of their work. Please just read the really excellent report in the appendix. The Health Foundation revealed its findings this year that women in England's poorest areas die younger than in most OECD countries. And added to this, Bristol women have lower life expectancy than the national average. Our Health Task Group has been lobbying for a refreshed chapter on women's health in the JSNA, in line with the new National Health Strategy for Women, which we've contributed to, and we're delighted that the Director of Public Health has enabled this. Our Health Task Group has contributed to this work, which is being finalised this week. It's been a huge and comprehensive undertaking, and now all those involved in health services in the city need to make full use of this chapter when decisions are made affecting our health. In our work in education, another girls' conference took place this year, organised by the students themselves, and a second tranche of aspiring female school leaders has been matched with mentors. However, almost 1 in 5 girls and young women who took part in a recent survey said they don't feel safe from sexual harassment at school, with girls and young women of colour even less likely to feel safe. The Commission has convened a working group across the education sector, including schools, colleges, both universities, and Avon and Somerset Police, to tackle this. New resources have been developed on consent and coercive control. But with the best will in the world, the scale of this problem is so huge, schools can't possibly tackle it alone in a few PSHE lessons. The whole of society has to address the attitudes of many boys and young men towards girls and young women. And finally, with regard to women's safety, our task group is making progress on safety on public transport, the nighttime economy, the development of a broader violence against women strategy for Bristol, and we're about to start our 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. We know that more than 10,000 domestic violence-related crimes took place in Bristol in 2020 to 21. 10,000. We're working closely with Chief Constable Sarah Crew, the Police and Crime Commissioner, and other leaders in the field as part of the Enough, Be Part of the Change initiative, which kicked off in May with a well-attended summit. We have strong representation on the steering group and all working groups continuing this vital work. So, in conclusion, It's clear that in all these areas, issues can only be addressed and progress made through working in partnership across sectors and organisations. The Women's Commission has, over the past year, sustained and extended the reach of its partnerships. And in the Commission's 10th year, it is remarkable that so many women continue to give their time and energy to tackling women's inequality in the city.
Thank you very much, Penny, for your report. Now I'd like to call on Councillor Kerry Bales to speak on behalf of the Labour Group. Kerry, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to the Women's Commission for this report and their work to advocate for women in Bristol this year. As the report says, there was a number of challenges facing women throughout the last year, all rooted in entrenched discrimination. One of these challenges is the price of childcare. Bristol has some of the most expensive childcare costs in the country. Only 2 weeks ago, thousands of mums turned up to the March of the Mummies to campaign for change. I would like to thank Councillor Beach for her role in organising this and highlighting this important issue. The report and the March of the Mummies both highlighted that 45% of carers could take on more work if organisations offered more flexible working. The government is expected to raise taxes to fill the financial gap left by Liz Truss. If it wants more tax revenue, giving women flexible working so they can return to work while balancing childcare is a good place to start. Bristol City Council gives all employees a right to request flexible working. The most employees who worked from home during COVID still being allowed to do so, so I am pleased the Council is playing its part in this. I am sure we can all welcome this. The change starts at home. But this matters with representation too. Last month, 50-50 Parliament held an event to celebrate Bristol's gender balanced cabinet. The 50-50 initiative has greatly improved women's representation in Bristol. However, there's 11 committees in the council that come with a special responsibility allowance for the chair. Only 3 of these committees are chaired by women. We need to do better than this. Thank you again to the Women's Commission for their work this year.
Thank you, Councillor Bales. I'd now like to call on Councillor Annie Stafford-Townsend to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I spoke in response to the Women's Commission report last year, and unfortunately the outlook for women and those assigned female or perceived female has not changed or improved much in that time. I noted with the appreciation the work to increase participation in politics with activities such as 50-50 and International Women's Day. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind the Women's Commission that other parties are available and that there are women members of all the other parties, mostly other parties in this chamber. I also appreciate the acknowledgement of the abuse that women and those perceived female in public life receive. So I would urge the Women's Commission to keep that in mind when a committee such as licensing doesn't make a decision that the Commission agrees with. Events in the world, such as in America, in Poland, in Iran, and here in the UK, continues to remind us that much needs to be done for equality and for equity for all. And I remind the Chamber that the need for inclusive discourse and for public forum comments and forum comments generally to be inclusive is really important. And I call on this Chamber to remember that it's on us to make the changes that we want to see in the world. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I'd now like to call on Councillor Sharon Scott to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I'm very happy to respond to this report. I would like to thank Penny for the work of her commission and the various subgroups that have worked on this. We remain in challenging times with the prospects for the year ahead quite uncertain. The papers state this body is asked to cover a wide area of subjects. The resolution requires changes in society, attitude, culture and economics. Given time limitations, I will only comment on a few areas. In relation to women and the economy, we are told that nationally there are 165,000 vacancies in the care sector, which are crucially important services provided predominantly by women. The pandemic highlighted that the most valuable contributors to our society were made by the lowest paid. We need to continue to find ways of raising the status of these roles and ensuring that the workforce is better paid. This could be the most practical way of addressing staffing shortfalls. While progress on gender equality in boardrooms is welcomed, it is vital not to lose focus on improving the daily lives of most women, namely those individuals who don't want to be high flyers. Continued pressure must be applied to improve the situation regarding women's safety, whether it's on public transport or participating in the nighttime economy. The campaign around anti-spiking of drinks has been very effective in highlighting a serious crime. On education, it has been established that this is key to improving a person's life chances. I am keen that all women get access to better training and to pursue lifelong learning, including more traditional trades. It has been rightly said that when you educate a man, you educate a man. You educate a woman, you educate a generation. Please publish the group's final report and recommendations on the Women's Commission webpage. Thank you again to all who have contributed to this annual report. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. I'd now like to call on Councillor Sarah Classic to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group.
Thank you. I welcome the report from... Oh, God, I've just closed my speech. We're off to a fantastic start, sorry. So I'd like to thank the Bristol Women's Commission for this report. As we come in a post-COVID society and the looming cost of living crisis, this will greatly affect a number of women in this city. Overseas, we're seeing political attacks on our reproductive rights in America, in Poland, and those could very well come over here. It is a scary, scary time to be a woman sometimes in this world. I'm pleased to see a number of campaigns in this report tackling the continued issue women face of harassment in public life, that on public transport, that in the nighttime economy and in schools. As a woman, I have faced so many incidents of harassment that, to be honest, I can't even recall a single incident that comes to mind because it is so normalised among myself and among my friends. And I am very pleased to see those campaigns, especially within the nighttime economy, to tackle this. Another area that I really support Bristol Women's Commission's campaign is that on the issue of public toilets. The complete lack of public toilets in this city and the closure over the last few years really does impact women in this city, especially disabled women, especially homeless women. And this community toilet scheme that does not work with many pubs and restaurants that don't even know they're on the scheme, aren't even letting people in, is not sufficient. I recently attended a really great talk by the Bristol Walking Alliance on public toilets, and we heard fantastically from Watershed and the consultations that they did on their toilets. And this is what we need publicly available throughout the city. Inclusive toilets that work for everybody, that people in the city have been consulted on. And I would like to see that the council take up that and reopen public toilets. As we run into the 2024 elections, I welcome the work that Bristol Women's Commission is doing to get more women elected within this chamber. At the moment, currently, I think it's around 41% of councillors in this chamber are women, and yet 51% of Bristol residents are women. More needs to be done to make politics accessible for women.
Classic.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
Thank
God,
you.
by everyone.
And finally, I'd like to call on Councillor Gary Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Noel Community Party.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. A lot of what's gone before I would agree with, and therefore I won't waste your time by repeating it. I want to look at one area which I think is important, and that is in education. A lot of work is done trying to rectify damage that's happened and to stop assaults, to stop discrimination, etc. I think the entry into the education system to try to prevent bad attitudes actually starting and increasing is one of the most important things that the Women's Commission can actually do. Misogynists aren't born, They're made by the society round about them. And basically, education facilities are the place that can actually tackle a lot of the problems. So I welcome the report, and I hope that further work will happen in engaging with the education sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. So that ends the debate on this, and I would like to thank you, Penny, for bringing this very interesting report and for presenting it in such a cogent manner. So the report is noted, and as I said, it concludes agenda item 9, which we then move on to agenda item 11, which is another Commission update, and it's a report from the Commission on race equality. Again, this report is for noting. So I would like to ask the Commission Chair, Musechi Takolia, to introduce the report. I'm so embarrassed. I should have looked at that beforehand and really got your name correct, but I hope I've made a fairly good stab at it.
You're taking up my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I really do appreciate that, Lord Mayor.
5 minutes to speak.
Yes, you did. Absolutely perfect. Thank you. Good evening, members, Lord Mayor. This is my second year too. I'd like to begin by congratulating Alan and Penny on really detailed and impactful reports and the work of their commissions. The work of this commission works at a different pace. This year, as I've reported to some councillors that have had the opportunity to reach out to, we've focused on 4 areas. And those 4 areas are health and well-being, the criminal justice system, education, and economy, skills and jobs. Progress, as with the other commissions, is largely thanks to the work of voluntary contributions of my fellow commissioners, so I want to acknowledge their contributions to our work, as well as the partnership nature of the work we do. The collaboration secured no small measure for the support we received from the City Council, the Chief Executive, from Mike Farrer, whom I want to give mention to as Chair of the Integrated Care Board, and the Chief Constable, Sarah Crew, and Mark Shelford at the police. We lost some continuity in our work in education with staff changes at City Hall. I'll come on to that a little later. The 4th and final priority on economy, skills and jobs, we will report on in the new year. It involves Temple Quarter. It's been subject to the funding and the development work, but it is, I would say, probably the highest in terms of opportunity and impact that we're likely to be addressing. Finally, the report alludes to work we've undertaken. Sometimes during the course of your work you have plans and then things happened. And what happened was Azim Rafiq gave testimony in Parliament involving racism in cricket at Yorkshire Cricket Club, and we in Bristol ended up with our own inquiry and findings that will be reported on next week. It's fair to say that locally our findings are equally horrific and likely to draw focus on Bristol, both locally, press locally and nationally. We submitted our evidence to the England and Wales Cricket Board's Independent Commission on Equity in Cricket back in April, and we'll be making our report public next week with the supporting statement of the work we're doing with cricketing bodies and clubs. I'd like to move on and say that as councillors, you probably should be concerned at the slow pace of change to improve educational outcomes for Black, Asian and other minority ethnic groups in the city. The evidence of the gaps in attainment affecting some groups in Bristol is compelling, and especially coming out of the pandemic where disparities have widened. I'll be raising my concerns in this regard with the Government's Regional Commissioner for Schools very soon. We have moved on to implementation in the other 2 areas, with health and with the criminal justice system. On the criminal justice system, I'd like to thank Des Brown with the groundbreaking report, 2 years' work, that has formed the basis for an independent group chaired by or led by Sarah Crew that will report on implementation. And that's the phase the work is moving on to with the Race Commission's relationships with both that and health, where Mike Farrer is also introducing an independent commission. We report on hate crimes, you'll notice, in the report, including the rise in attacks on Muslims in Bristol. The statistics from SARI are set out in summary and is the background to an otherwise calmer commentary on policy developments. Sadly, that uglier backdrop to our work is clear evidence of the continuing challenge we face to combat hate crime. And closing, Lord Mayor, subject to partnership bid being developed with the top UK consulting firm, I hope this time next year to be reporting to you that we have in place something that I'm using as a working project, the Bristol Race Tracker. This will take the baseline of data coming out from the latest census to allow us to identify what we measure and where change is happening, so that we stop talking about the theory of change and begin to see real change in all the areas that matter to you and matter to the members of the public. And finally, and my final comment, with changes afoot in governance at the City Council, it's timely to review the current structures from a sustainability and funding perspective as far as race equality is concerned. And I want to emphasise it's about race. The Commission will come forward with proposals to strengthen arrangements for leadership on race in the city with an eye on stronger cross-sector partnerships, leadership and impact. I'd like to conclude by thanking the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor, Black South West Network and the Equality Unit in the City Council for the support. They've been amenable to advice and to challenge. Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing this report. Thank you. And I'd now like to call on Councillor Asher Craig to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you.
It's 2 minutes for these.
Okay. Operating independently, like the Women's and Disability Commission, the Commission on Race Equality was established to look at race and ethnicity discrimination in this city, with the aim of working with Bristol's communities and organisations to improve and prioritise race equality, to achieve an inclusive, cohesive, thriving and representative city. Hold public, private and voluntary sectors to account in relation to upholding the Bristol Race Equality Manifesto, and to report on progress on race equality and the general impact of inequality and discrimination on Bristol's black and minoritized communities. Work to uncover, challenge and support the city to tackle race and ethnicity discrimination has continued at pace this year. In this year's annual report, the Commission outlines in detail the work it has undertaken this year in pursuit of its core aim, including, amongst others, engaging minority communities across the city, challenging organisations in relation to race inequality, and supporting the development of policy and practice that embeds race equality into planning, delivery and outcomes. During the past year, Commissioners have focused their efforts in a number of ways, and the Chair, Museji, has laid this out in his report. The Mayor set up the Commission with the intent of shining a light on race inequality in the city, to develop an honest and mature conversation about how we tackle the issues that communities face. The Commission has throughout its existence consisted of experts with both lived and learnt experience of racism, race inequality and the barriers this issue places in front of individuals and groups. We are delighted to see the Commission continue its work to help dismantle systemic racism, drive generational change and better lived experiences for black and minoritized people in this city.
Thank you, Councillor.
And the green shoots and momentum, hope and willingness to change in all corners of our society.
Thank you.
The report to full council.
We are trying to keep these promptly.
I've only got one sentence. It's one sentence. The report to full council submitted by the Commission includes a full set of activities that the group will focus on in 2023, and I'd like to thank the Chair and all the Commissioners who have been relentless in their mission to work
towards
the elimination of racism.
I would now like to call on Councillor Mohammed Makawi to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I welcome this report, and I would like to pay tribute to the time and tremendous amount of work that the Commission have done as well the Black Southwest Network and external bodies who have contributed to the planning and direction for 2021-22. I welcome and support the Commission focus for 2022, especially on creating a dialogue and briefing all political parties in the Council, raising public awareness of CORE, increasing engagement and enabling the public to hold statutory bodies to account by organizing meetings in public on health, education and criminal justice, submitting evidence to the England and Wales Cricket Board, Independence Commissioner, and working with Research Action Coalition for Race Equality, the Southwest Race Equality Action Group, BSWN, and others. The Green Party believes racism is unacceptable and must be opposed in all of its forms and in all areas of society. We need systematic change to address the institutional racism in our criminal justice system, the racist and intolerance message in our media, and our inhumane and unjust immigration and asylum system. It is very sad that this is still needed, but this was only provided yesterday when my colleague, Councillor Yassin Mahmood, reported to us that the big head had been placed at Extron in Barton Hill. Let us not forget we have a government in Westminster at the moment that is stirring up racist hatred against vulnerable asylum seekers to deflect attention from their many failures. This year, for the first time, there were more than 100,000 racist hate crimes recorded in England and Wales. Against this backdrop
Councillor
of
Macaulay,
increasing...
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, please.
Yes. Backdrop of increasing racism and hate crime, work like this is more important than ever. I will look forward to see the CORE aims for 2023 implemented and support you, asking for the Council to contribute.
Thank you, Councillor Macaulay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to ask Councillor Jeff Gollop to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And can I thank you, Chair, for that report. It is quite a remarkable report, and the amount of work that's been done and the issues you're raising there show, sadly, why the work you do is necessary. And the SARI figures show that as well. And I can add to Mohammed's comments because I am sure every member of my group and every member of council condemns racism in every form and wants to see everything we can done to prevent this from happening. I found reading the report showed to me the challenges you have in actually determining... Not working? Is that working now? Yeah, you're good. Okay. The items show the difficulties you have in prioritising the work you do. Comments about the criminal justice system. It's fundamental to every community in our city that every community has confidence in that system. If it doesn't, it undermines it for all of us. So that is absolutely critical. But it seemed to me that when you're talking about education and SEND, and when you're talking about health and integrated care, actually we all have concerns about whether those subjects are being dealt with properly, and it is incredibly important that we know that those problems are no worse for your community that you're representing than they are for the rest of us. I have a fear that they are, and it's absolutely fundamental that we as councillors understand where it is going wrong so that we can help to identify why it is going wrong. If I can just add to your challenges, though, the comment about economy and jobs and skills, I see as another issue that really
Can I
needs
ask
to
you
be
to wind
prioritised.
up, please, Councillor Gollop?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Because with cost of living as a pressure for everybody, it's fundamental we know that it's being addressed. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you.
I commend the report to the House.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite Councillor Joss Clark to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Thank you very much for this thorough and comprehensive report. The first thing that sprung out at me was the mention of Brislington West in the data for the race-based hate crime. And it is fair to say that I was really alarmed by this, along with my colleague, Councillor Andrew Varney. We are all too aware of the tragic events of July 2014 of Bijan Ibrahimi, who was murdered not far away from us in the neighbouring ward of Brislington East. I then take a look at the data to see that the reporting period is less than 2 months per year. Obviously, this triggers more questions than it answers. So I then take a look at the police data, and again, it's difficult to get a picture of what's actually going on. So, in essence, with respect to Brislington West, I'm really pleased that we've got a meeting set up for next week so that I can talk about the issues in my ward, but also wider issues across across Bristol and how things are going across the city. But obviously I have a particular interest in Brislington West, just to highlight that for you. It's clear that you and your colleagues have been working on with a range of organisations across the city to ensure that race equality is on the agenda. This is no mean feat, and it would be good to pay tribute to the whole team on the Commission, those who are standing down and those who are going to continue in subsequent years across this, obviously the coming year. Just by coincidence, I was listening to an interview on my way in today on Times Radio by with Britain's first black female professor of history at Bristol University, Dr. Olivette.
Can I ask you to wrap up, please, Councillor Clark?
Right, okay. And her experiences, and it was not a comfortable listen, I have to say. Just to say that, I just wanted to say that I think that racism is still in this city, and I have an experience in Brislington West, which happened to me just recently.
Thank you,
and I was
Clark.
absolutely stunned, and I'm really, really sorry about that. But I would look forward to having a conversation with you next week. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call on Councillor Gary Hopkins to speak now on behalf of the Knoll Community Party.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was also very surprised to see Brislington West mentioned in that way, as it's a neighbouring ward to mine and has lots of similarities. I think it would have been helpful if we had an explanation of exactly where that sort of thing had come from. Was it, was it a one-off event connected with something, whatever? So that would have been helpful. I did note also in those statistics that the previous year featured a number of incidents against East Europeans, which seem to have diminished. Unfortunately, I don't think it is just because people have become more tolerant and more educated. I think one of the most hateful comments that is made in racist attacks are, "Go home." Well, I'm afraid quite a lot of our East European friends have gone home, and that is one reason why the numbers of incidents against East Europeans has gone down. We as a society are poorer as a result. I think that's a classic example of where racism is actually offending the whole of our society and not just the immediate victims. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Thank you, and I would just like to say to Ms Eki, thank you for bringing this report, and thank you for all the work that you do on it. It's very important work, and it's reflected in the comments by members this evening. There will now be an adjournment for 20 minutes. Refreshments for councillors are in the rooms along the corridor as advised before the meeting, and the conference hall is also available to us to use. I'd like to thank you for your presence here in the first half, and I think we'll start back at, I'd say, 15:15, if we can all be back by 7:15. Thank you. 8:15. Yes, can't go back in time. 8:15. Excellent. Thank you. Welcome back. At this point in the meeting, we suspect the meeting is likely to run past the 2.5 hours allowed within the Constitution. So therefore, the convention is that we move a motion to extend the time to hear the remaining reports and the golden motion. And we are advised that it will take an extra 30 minutes. So can I take it as agreed by everybody in the chamber today that we will go for an extra 30 minutes to hear the golden motion? Aye. All those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Called your bluff. So I take that as agreed. Thank you. So we are now coming back to agenda item 12, which is the annual report of Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman's decision. Again, this is a report which is for noting. And I would like to call on Councillor Craig Cheney to speak on behalf of the Labour Group, who's working very hard tonight.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. The Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman report gives the Council a valuable opportunity to learn from its mistakes. As the report states, there are 22 complaints upheld each year. Each one of these needs to provide a lesson from which the Council can learn. The 22 upheld complaints all related to a variety of subject matters, so this shows that while there is, of course, room for improvement, the report does not show that there are systemic flaws with any one department resulting in complaints. The letter to the CEO states that if the Ombudsman recommendations were implemented less than 100% of the time, this would be a cause for concern. Fortunately, this is not the case in Bristol, where all complaints in 21-22 were remediated in line with the recommendations. In a similar vein, the Ombudsman found that the Council remediates the complaint before it was escalated to them 23% of the time, which is almost double the national average of 12%. So this is a particularly reassuring statistic. The letter to the Chief Exec also highlighted 2 cases which were not in line with what the Ombudsman would expect. There's not enough detail in the report to specify which these were, but I would like to apologise for the handling of these complaints and reiterate that the Council will learn from this. We're working to improve our complaints procedure and are conducting wider staff training within the Council to improve the initial Stage 1 response. In the Local Government Ombudsman letter for the past 2 years, concern was expressed about the level of engagement between the Council and the Ombudsman. I'm pleased there are no concerns raised in this year's letter, as the Council has improved its complaint handling, in part by increasing the resources allocated to the complaints procedure. This shows that the Council has learnt from previous Ombudsman reports in other years, so I very much expect it will learn to take action on the issues raised in this year's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Craig Cheney. And I'd now like to pass on to Councillor Tim Wye to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you very much. And thank you for this detailed report. I spoke about this last time, so it's interesting to see the progress. There's certainly good news. I agree with Craig. In particular, it's a relief to see that in all of the upheld complaints, the Council complied with the Ombudsman's recommendations. And that was quite a big cause for concern last year, if you remember that. So that's really good to see. Secondly, it's good to see that investigations reduced from 95 in 2021 to 34 this year. And furthermore, I think whilst not the best, we're certainly not wildly out of kilter with some of the other authorities in terms of volume of complaints and upheld Ombudsman inquiries. And whilst it's, 0 would be perfect and best, 22 upheld complaints, perhaps in the number of interactions that the Council had is not unexpected. So all of these things, I think, indicate that our complaints and investigation systems are improving from last year's really quite critical report. However, the Ombudsman still points out to the 2 cases Craig mentioned, and I quote their response, "Your Council's response to those recommendations was not what we would expect." So whilst there's been welcome improvement, I think we just need to ask ourselves that we should not be complacent, especially as our financial position is almost certain to increase the level of and volume of complaints as services are affected. So I would just end with repeating the words of the Ombudsman. I urge you to consider how your organisation prioritises complaints, particularly in terms of capacity and visibility. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wye. So I'd now like to call on Councillor Graham Morris to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Whilst this report is for noting, there are a few things that I think are worth mentioning. It has to be acknowledged that every organisation does make mistakes and errors will occur. It's how we deal with these errors and complaints and the speed and transparency with which we deal with these issues, which determines whether we are serious about learning and wishing to improve. A few things I noticed reading the report. So complaints are up 3% this year. What I would actually like to see, because this report looks mainly at the 1 year in isolation, would be a trend analysis over the previous 4 or 5 years, which I think would actually strengthen the comfort that we might have as to whether we're going in a positive direction or a negative direction. As Councillor Cheney mentioned, our figures are on a par with other authorities, but I do recognise that we are twice above the average for providing suitable remedies. The issues are sort of widespread, but there were some comments in there about failing to maintain and build proper and accurate records. And the one thing that we heard mentioned in the public gallery tonight, and also which came across very strongly in the report, was the lack of enforcement. And it would be good to see whether we can get some improvement across all the divisions in the council as to how we can improve the enforcement capacity within this council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. I'd now like to call on Councillor Tim Kent to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for bringing this report to us, and it gives us a good chance to reflect on the services we provide to our residents, who, of course, we all serve. I realise the context of COVID and increased demands on our staff and the budgetary pressures we face is something we should always keep in mind when looking at such reports. I think, though, basic good service should be our first and last principle as a council. Getting the basics right is one of the most important things we can do for our residents. And looking at the figures, we must begin to question, are we doing that when we see over 6,000 complaints a year from our residents? Looking at the casework particularly, so I was just thinking actually, as a councillor, I was thinking of my personal casework. I get hundreds every year, I'm sure, like every member in this chamber. And I was trying to work out how much of that is complaining about sort of a failure in basic service, and I'd say over half of that is. And I certainly have seen a real increase in my casework over the last few years, and I expect other members have as well. And I think that points to systemic problems within the system, and we all know that there are real issues regarding funding. When we look at the Ombudsman report, I mean, we're not seeing any real improvement over the last few years. I do accept the letter wording was a little bit better this year, which is good news. But I think one area in particular I wanted to bring attention to, and we've already heard a bit about it in the chamber, is EHCPs, so education. The Ombudsman did bring a particular case to us this year. I think in honesty, we know we're lucky that only one case was brought to us. As a council, we're failing to offer to our residents, disabled children, a minimum legal service. Hundreds of our residents are not being served in a legal way every year, and that's an area I hope as a council we will improve in, but at the moment we have not put the resources in place to allow officers to be able to achieve those improvements. So I just want to conclude by thanking the officers for the work they do. I know that too much is asked of too few people, and asking for more in such circumstances is a very tough ask. But as a council, I think we've always got to strive to try to do better for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kent. And finally, I'd like to call on Councillor Gary Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The first thing to say is that we should all realise that for anybody to get through all the processes to get to the Ombudsman takes quite a lot of work and determination. They've really got to be really cheesed off about a subject before they get that far. Having said that, it's very important to have reports of this type which actually are objective. We all know that any report we get from this administration will say we do wonderfully well, it's all perfect, rose-coloured glasses, it's great. This report is actually quite useful because it actually shows that we're average in terms of dealing with complaints that go to the Ombudsman. Now, that might not seem great, but compared to 2 or 3 of the reports we had in recent years, which have been absolute shockers, this is at least some improvement. I think that we need to be aware, though, that a lot of stuff is bubbling up beneath the surface, which will go to the Ombudsman. And one area I think that we have got to look at in particular is enforcement, and in particular planning enforcement. That is going to cause this authority a massive problem, because when people get really cheesed off about planning issues where there's no lack of enforcement, they really do get annoyed. It affects their lives. So we need to be trying to tackle these issues before they reach the Ombudsman. And I'm afraid in that area, that's just not happening at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. So, thank you. This report is noted, and that concludes this agenda item. Moving on then to agenda item 13, which is the annual report of the Audit Committee. This is another report that is for noting, and I would like to call on Councillor Andrew Brown to move the report as he is chair of the Audit Committee. Councillor Brown, thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Finally, the report you've all been waiting on all night. First, I'd like to note that this report is for the 2021 to 2022 year, and as such, it covers just a few months of my tenure as chair. So I'd like to acknowledge the work of my predecessor, Councillor Hopkins, who chaired 4 out of the 5 meetings during the period covered by this report. Next, I would like to thank the officers that support the committee's work, Alison Taylor from Democratic Services, and Simba Mazarawi and Alison Mullis from Internal Audit. I'd also like to thank all officers who have attended to provide answers to members' questions, and to those who have provided additional briefings or opportunities to explore issues in depth. There are too many to list in full, but I'd particularly like to thank Denise Murray as Chief Finance Officer and John Roberts from Grant Thornton for their extensive shifts in front of the committee. The Audit Committee's primary job is to gain assurance on behalf of this Council that the Council's governance and risk management are effective. I'm happy to say that I believe that we are generally achieving this. However, that is not to say that there are not areas that we need to focus on more. The report before you identifies in particular that the committee has picked up additional work on IT security, risk management and procurement breaches, and these are being explored at both formal meetings and informal briefings of members. Members of this chamber may well have their own thoughts on other items that need exploring. I'm particularly aware of concerns over City Leap, our arms length companies and the Bristol Beacon project. We have also resolved to liaise with other audit boards of key partner organisations, to work with the scrutiny commissions where appropriate, and to ensure that questions not answered in committee can be followed up and answers made public, amongst other things. Going forward, I also want to raise the profile of the committee, and I'm hopeful that we will be able to get webcasts up and running, at least during my tenure as chair, but we'll see how that goes. In the coming months, our internal audit department will be subject to peer review. This should provide further assurance on the quality of internal reviews conducted within the organisation, as well as any areas of potential weakness. The outcome of the appointments process for external auditors will also be made public, and I hope to be able to continue working constructively with them, whoever they may be. Finally, I would like to thank my fellow committee members, and in particular Simon Cookson and Adebola Adebayo, who are independent members and who bring valuable experience from outside of the Council. I'd also like to thank Councillor Dyer as my Vice Chair, who was a great help, particularly when I took on the role. Councillor Wilcox for his expertise and doggedness in questions related to IT and risk management, and Councillor Hucker for the same with regards to accounting matters. It's really important that we utilise all the expertise of councillors on the committee, and I recommend the report to the House.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. Now I'd like to call on Councillor Fabian Breckles to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I would like to thank Councillor Brown for chairing the committee in the last few months, and again officers for their assistance throughout this year. Like Councillor Brown, I also joined the committee a few months ago, so I've not been involved with the work of it during the whole last municipal year. And as this is set to be quite a long meeting, I'm going to keep comments as brief as possible. The purpose of the Audit Committee is to identify flaws in what we do as a council, ensure they're addressed while operating and functioning in an apolitical environment, which, apart from audit having independent members, which have already been mentioned, is how regulatory committees, planning, what have you, are also supposed to operate. And it's been happening effectively in Audit. Although the membership of this committee has completely changed following the 21 elections, but there's been training for new members and the committee has settled in well, understands its remit and provides the necessary scrutiny. In the Chief Internal Auditor's annual report, they stated that there was an improved position in internal control, risk management, governance arrangements, and areas, obviously, where there's opportunities for improvement, for example, housing rents, and officers have assured us that improvements are being made. So it shows that both the committee and the council is working effectively. We find areas that could do with improvement, and the council acts to rectify those issues. It's called continuous improvement in most organisations. So the report acknowledges there's always room for further improvement. One of these areas is where procurement regulations were broken last year. While that's of concern to the Audit Committee, I'm reassured by the swift response the council has taken, implementing a procurement strategy, providing more training opportunities and quarterly reports to the Audit Committee. So we provide a vital scrutiny and oversight to all the council does. I'd also like to thank the rest of the committee members and the officers for this report, and I look forward to spending more time on this committee in the following municipal year.
Thank you very much, Councillor Beckles. I'd like to call on Councillor Tony Dyer to speak on behalf of the Green Group. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As we enter into an extremely difficult period for local government finance, not just here in Bristol, but across the country, it is worth reminding ourselves as a council that a key role of the Audit Committee is to mitigate the risk of any failure of the council to obtain independent assurance in relation to, amongst other things, governance processes, risk management and internal control, and effectiveness of financial and non-financial performance. The Chief Internal Auditor, as identified in the report, reported an improved position regarding the Council's internal control, risk management and governance arrangements, reflecting progress made by the Council in addressing some of the long outstanding issues that had remained unresolved for several years. However, the Chief Internal Auditor also reports and acknowledges that there are areas that still require improvement, as identified in this report. Lord Mayor, it will fall upon Audit Committee members working alongside our internal and external auditors to provide the necessary risk mitigation and to monitor the performance improvement required going forward. The consequences of not doing so are potentially significant for this council, given the current economic and political uncertainty. To do that, Lord Mayor, requires that each and every member of the Audit Committee is fully committed to contributing to the work of the committee, that they have the opportunity to access available training to help them fulfil their role, and that Audit Committee members attend that training when it is offered. It should go without saying that also requires committee members to attend the public meetings of Audit Committee. My Lord Mayor, if the Audit Committee is to be effective going forward, it needs everybody to play their part. We cannot carry any passengers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer. I would now like to call on Councillor Jonathan Hucker to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Over the period covered by the report, the committee has received and considered a huge amount of detailed technical information, and I think its deliberations have been carried out in a spirit of cross-party cooperation and goodwill. All of us on the committee wish to see the most effective internal controls, risk management procedures and governance arrangements in place. We are concerned about the continuing delay in the completion of the 2020-21 Annual Statement of Accounts. The statutory deadline for completion was September 2021. However, over a year later, the Council's accounts have still not been completed and signed off. This would not be tolerated in the private sector. Each time I raise this, I am told that it is because Bristol City Council is a large and complex organisation. However, to put this into context, giant multinational PLCs with complex financial structures can get their accounts signed off within a few months of the end of the financial year. I understand that a national issue around it, accounting for infrastructure assets, is now causing the auditors to delay the sign-off. However, the account should have been signed off long before this issue was ever raised in the first place. I am also astonished that the audit of the 2021-22 accounts is not planned to be completed until January 2023, given the statutory deadline is November 2022. So Bristol City Council are not attempting to comply with the statutory requirements. I'm surprised that the Council only produce a balance sheet and a cash flow statement once a year, and by the time it's produced, it's out of date. How can anybody have an understanding of the Council's actual financial position at any point in time when such information is not available? Financial reporting appears to be fragmented and not joined up. The Council only account for accruals in work in progress at year end. It is obvious, therefore, that actual costs incurred are not being captured in the accounting system throughout the year. Therefore, the Council only produce forecasts and not actual accounts for Cabinet on a monthly basis. It is obvious that budget managers have to try to manage their cost centres in capital projects without visibility of accurate and timely financial information. Many of the internal audit reports have offered reasonable assurance, which is satisfactory. However, in too many cases, only limited assurance has been given, and this is obviously a cause for concern. We must remain sighted on the improvements required in these areas and track their delivery.
Thank you, Councillor Hucker. A good point to stop.
Okay, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. And now I'd like to come to Councillor Gary Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thanks to all the officers and the members who worked on the first half of this year with me. And we formed a very effective team, and I'm sure that that will continue. It's the job of the Audit Committee to get the governance right, to get the structures right, rather than to be running around afterwards complaining about things. And I think that the work in that has been quite effective, but there's still a way to go. I'd like to draw attention, I think Councillor Hucker has made the points very well with regard to the timing on audit sign-off, etc. Draw the attention to 4.4 paragraph. Too many cases where internal auditors could not give a clean bill of health, having had a look at the department and the way it was operating. And that was a lack of peer review. So basically, various departments were in a position where they just could not show that they were doing things properly. And internal auditors were finding that out and reporting to us that there was a problem or potential problem. And in most cases, they could have easily been solved by more detailed attention to peer review. I had to produce the last time the report on Bristol Energy, and the external auditors did a wonderful job on that, working with us on that and exposing what actually happened. Having said that, there is a concern that for the future, the wholly owned companies might be a smaller repeat of that going wrong. It wasn't just that bad decisions were made with the Bristol Energy Company, the governance was seriously wrong, which meant that it was quite difficult for this council to actually check what was happening and put a stop to it before it became as ridiculously expensive as it was. And we need to pay very close attention to how the housing company, the waste company, etc., are performing and how their results and their performance have been reported to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. And that brings the debate on this to a close. The report is noted and the agenda item is completed. And this brings us on now to agenda item 14, which is our golden motion. And this golden motion is called Setting a Realistic Housing Target for Bristol. The motion will be shown on the screen in the room during the proposing speeches. So first of all, I'd like to ask Councillor Tony Dyer of the Green Group to move the motion. Thank you, Councillor Dyer.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I rise to propose this motion which calls upon Ford Council to express its full support for an evidence-based led local plan that accurately reflects, the housing need and delivery capacity of our city. That's the danger of eating a grape just before you stand up to speak.
Sorry, Tony.
It endorses the approach being proposed by the Local Plan Working Group, and it should be noted almost everyone you will be speaking to this motion tonight sits on that cross-party working group. My Lord Mayor, the forthcoming local plan will guide development within our city until 2040, and many of the proposed policies are not only innovative, but also acknowledge not just where we are today, but where we need to be as a city if we are serious about tackling the climate and ecological emergencies, as well as providing decent homes for those most in need. This is a practical motion aimed at supporting a realistic and pragmatic approach to planning and housing in Bristol. It endorses the Council's approach of commissioning an evidence-based study to examine how much housing is required in a city of Bristol's size. It rejects the imposition of a 35% uplift in housing numbers that fails to reflect the realities on the ground in a closely confined urban local authority like Bristol. And it supports focusing on delivering truly affordable homes for long-term rent to help those most in need, including the ever-increasing number of families on the housing waiting list. My Lord Mayor, to summarise, setting an evidence-based housing target for the city will allow us to better protect green spaces and ensure local planning policy as the necessary force to ensure more sustainable, affordable and higher quality developments in Bristol, reflecting the voices of locally elected representatives and the residents of the city itself. My Lord Mayor, our local plan needs to be Bristol's local plan, not Westminster's. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer. I would now like to ask Councillor Jenny Bartle of the Green Group to second the motion.
Thank you. So I've been on the local plan working group since I was elected last year, and since then I've been learning what a local plan can do, understanding kind of how it fits together, and starting to get kind of excited about the new policies we're looking to bring in. There's been a lot of, the plan has a lot of green ambitions, like pushing for new housing to be of a higher standard than ever, creating space for nature and prioritising walking and cycling. And there's a lot of difficult stuff to balance too, like guaranteeing a supply of land for industrial employment and maximising affordability, of course, and ensuring that we're actually creating and enhancing neighbourhoods that Bristolians want. But of all the things I've learned about in my time on the working group, the most concerning to me is that the government's housing target numbers for our city are about as achievable as building Rome in a day. If we could find the land supply, then I'd be pushing us to go for this target. If we had managed to build this many residences before, then I'd be pushing for us to go for this target. And if our neighbouring authorities were just begging to take up any of our unmet need, then I'd be pushing for this target. But it's clear to everyone that none of these conditions are anywhere near being met. Bristol has a terrible shortage of housing, which is driving up rents and making it harder to live here or move here. These problems can't just be solved with supply-side interventions, but if we don't increase our supply, then these issues will get worse. So we need to build as many houses as we can, but we cannot simply pluck numbers out of thin air and pretend we have the industry to deliver them. So this motion is a plain statement that we really want to make progress with our local plan, and we cannot let Westminster hold us hostage on an unreasonable promise. I hope you'll all vote for it to send the strongest possible message to them that we need a more realistic target for Bristol. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartle. So now it's time to hear from the speakers on the motion, and I'd like to go first to Councillor Beach to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Tony, for using the green golden motion on this really, really important and nuanced issue. Before I go any further, it is a great opportunity, actually a dress rehearsal, I suppose, to thank the members across the chamber who are part of the Local Plan Working Group. For many, many, many months, we've methodically been meeting and working through all aspects of the local plan policy. This motion reflects the approach that Labour is leading in my role. We're taking this evidence-based approach, looking at the amount of land that exists in our city for housing, employment, retail, leisure, a plan for Bristol built in Bristol. And we really, really welcome the Green support for this approach to house building in those 4 resolutions. I'm immensely proud of the renewed local plan that we're putting forward together. We're working cross-party to develop proposals to deliver what Bristol needs, maximising our housing potential by building more densely on brownfield sites close to the city centre, making the most of the huge regeneration opportunities at Temple Quarter, around Bedminster and Western Harbour. We reject the government's 2019 Johnson Manifesto commitment of 300,000 homes a year. That's not because I think the UK is incapable of delivering 300,000 homes a year, but because of a lack of political bravery needed to take that holistic view of UK growth. But instead, scared of upsetting their voters in the rural hinterlands, they took this figure for a total number of homes to the 20 biggest cities and slapped a top-down 35% increase on all our housing numbers. We have a housing crisis in Bristol. We want thousands of affordable homes to be built every year, but local government cannot be penalised for not reaching a target that was set by an ex-Prime Minister. The number of affordable homes being built in Bristol has reached a 12-year high. We've launched a strategy of how to build 1,000 affordable homes a year, and thank you, Tony, for that acknowledgement. And we've got spades in the ground of the biggest council housing development in a generation. We're ambitious, both in the administration and in the local plan working group. But even if we far exceed our ambitious targets, to Jenny's point, and the other along with our other major cities, we just do not have the land to build the homes in that non-evidence-based target. Following our own housing need assessment and in line with the recommendations of this motion, we'll be planning for tens of thousands of homes to be built in this city, and we should be given the ability to do that without interference from Whitehall. Michael Gove II, now back in post, I very much hope the government will rethink that 35% uplift and instead trust local government to plan our future ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beach. And can I now call on Councillor Richard Eddy to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Too often, members debating here can descend into just the trivial, with speakers advancing almost tribal political posturing. Frankly, such performances do little credit to the speakers, and there is less benefit to the city we represent. I am pleased that today can be different, and I trust better. The Gordon housing motion tabled by Councillor Tony Dyer addresses arguably the most important problem facing Bristolians, our housing crisis, and is welcome and goes to the heart of the issue. Cross-party, we all want to expand the housing stock, especially so-called affordable housing, in a timely, practical and deliverable manner. And Councillor Dyer is proposing a practical way of planning for a realistic level of new housing. We need evidence-based housing, as Councillor Beach and I have said, not pie in the sky. The very fact that this motion is proposed by Councillor Dyer fills me with some reassurance too. Unlike some of his colleagues in the Green Party, Tony doesn't strike me as a woolly environmentalist who prefers to live in a cave and turns off the electric lights. He also has the additional advantage of hailing from South Bristol, so you can't fail there, Tony. However, it would be fair to admit that my personal endorsement is unlikely to win you street cred in the Green Group. So, sorry, Tony. I'm sure all of us in this chamber have been encouraged to hear the new Prime Minister, and I checked before this debate, and it still is Rishi Sunak, say that he did not believe in top-down national housing targets, and he has pledged to tackle land banking and reprioritise the gradual drive for brownfield site development. But the proof of the pudding will come in radical changes in how local authorities like Bristol are expected to plan for housing need. In particular, we need to see the end of the ludicrous housing uplift requirement, which requires the 20 biggest councils, including Bristol, to plan for 35% extra homes. Ludicrous. How does anyone in this chamber
soon, please,
really expect us? So, in summary, Lord Mayor, I urge members to back this motion. The Tory group will be voting for it with passion.
Thank you. So we can look forward to the Tories voting with passion. Good. Can I call on Councillor Andrew Brown now to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group, please?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I fear I might be about to upset Councillor Eddy, but never mind. I've enjoyed my time on the local plan working group over recent months, which I found to be a really constructive forum for discussion and improvement of the plan, which will soon be made public. I think it bodes well for the future as we move to the committee system. That's not to say all members will like all aspects, of course, but that's a debate for another day. We are in at least two binds when it comes to the local plan. On the one hand, we have a responsibility to develop it, but we have been left to do it in a vacuum. There is no joint spatial plan after the previous flawed effort was flung out by the Planning Inspectorate, and work on the spatial development strategy has been halted by the Metro Mayor. As an aside, these benches voted against the flawed joint spatial plan when this chamber voted to approve it, because we could see the flaws in it. Well, not me, but my predecessors. This means that no one is taking responsibility for making a strategic assessment of at a regional level of the housing needs, nor to negotiate how that should be distributed across the area. On the other hand, we are facing a government that has set an unrealistic framework for city councils to adhere to. Now, the government likes to make a big deal of its housing targets, or it did. Truss refers to that, and who knows where we are now. I've heard one minister reiterate the 300,000 figure, but Councillor Eddy advises us that the Prime Minister is against top-down housing targets. But whatever the current position is, in the past 7 years since the 2015 election, there have been 10 housing ministers, and the most recently appointed is only a parliamentary undersecretary rather than a Minister of State as previously. So they've been demoted. The position has been demoted within the government. It's difficult to find a revolving door that's revolved faster than the one at 10 Downing Street, but this definitely is one. Meanwhile, there have been 8 secretaries of state, and spending in the department and on local government has been slashed more than most other departments. It's not so much the Department of Levelling Up as the Department of Levelling Down. So back to the local plan. It is clear that the government formula, based on figures that are almost a decade old, dating back to 2014, which insist on an arbitrary uplift of 35%, is unrealistic and undeliverable. Further, the figure, 67,000, makes things more difficult in achieving agreement with neighbouring authorities as to where that surplus should be supplied. So another approach is required, and engaging with experts to determine a more realistic figure as is proposed in this motion and has been proposed by the working group and the officers, building on that methodology with our colleagues in neighbouring authorities as they develop their plans. It is clearly a solution that helps us out in the twin binds that we find ourselves in, and we'll be supporting the motion too.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. So now I'd like to call on Councillor Gary Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Clearly, it's part of our fundamental DNA that we believe that centrally set targets with lack of local knowledge are very dangerous. And in this case, certainly they are, and unrealistic. I think that also we need to take into account the circumstances in Bristol. Bristol has quite tightly drawn boundaries. In other cities, the areas that they might have built some of the houses are within their boundary. In Bristol, some of the areas that we might have been building a significant number of houses are in neighbouring authorities, and that creates an extra problem for Bristol which shouldn't be ignored. Clearly, that would be better tackled if we were all working together with the surrounding authorities. Unfortunately, one of them is not even in Wecker because the previous administration were upset by the previous mayor, and the present administration are desperate to join but have been prevented from joining, which doesn't help the situation. When we were looking at housing previously, before the present system, there was actually quite reasonable cooperation, but I'm afraid that that's not exactly what it is now. And I think that that is also going to affect the total number of houses that are going to be built within the travel to work area of Bristol, which is what Cuba, the councils that used to be Avon, that was the area that they covered. And basically, you need to take into account the realities of the situation on the ground. And a number of those people who are going to be working in Bristol are going to be living outside Bristol, so that we will not be building the houses, others will be. I think that we must all stick together on this issue, and I urge everybody to support this motion so that we can go back to central government in a position of strength. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Councillor Dyer, as the mover of the motion, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Oops. I am very much conscious of the time, which is probably why I nearly just fell over. I would just like to thank everybody for their constructive comments and contribution to this debate, and may I request that we move to the vote immediately.
Okay, so on the advice of Councillor Dyer, we move to the vote. This will be an e-vote. Please ensure you are in your allocated seats so that your vote will be recorded accurately. You are voting on the motion, and the vote is 15 seconds. So please vote now. Unanimous? I think that might be a record. Yeah. So I think it's worth recording that we have 59 votes for, no abstains and no against. So congratulations on the golden motion being successful. Yes, congratulations. Okay, so there's a couple of things for me left to do, not very much. Just to say thank you all for your presence here this evening and for all of your contributions. And I'd like to thank people who have been in the public gallery, and to the stalwarts who are still here now. Well done, you. I think you must be waiting for a lift home. The next meeting of the full council will be held on Tuesday, the 13th of December. And it's fair enough for me to say finally, good evening, and it's time for me to go back to my cave.